to sell 100 copies in Australia, and the result was reported to Barber in '56, and it was we had sold 107 copies, and Barber was pleased with the result. And a number of those had been sold to my colleagues in the psychology unit of the army. And of course my parents met Barber at that time, my mother and father, and I was stationed at the door and ascertained their name of those that I didn't know, and Francis then took over from me and took them in to introduce them to Barber. And that again was sunny. There was a wonderful atmosphere, again of joy and goodwill. A happy gathering. And it's interesting that when I have met people who didn't meet Barber, so briefly taken in, introduced to him, that came on that day, shook hands with him, was given something, a little gift, a piece of dried fruit, or whatever it was that Barber was giving out. And so simple, and then they depart. No questions, no interview, no length of time, and yet how the memory of that continues after so many years.
Years.
Yeah.
Years.
How many years is it now? Was it 55 years? 50 or something. 55, 56 years, and I got a phone call just recently from a woman who had met Barber at 9 years of age, taken to meet Barber by her father, who knew of Barber, and she remembered meeting him. And yet, was not following him, was not...
the father wasn't really a Barber lover, so you just knew him.
Well, I don't know, Dana. I don't know. I remember him. I remember the father, but not in terms of the degree of intensity of his attachment to Barber. I don't remember those.
All I meant was she couldn't have been brought up in a Barber household.
Maybe. Again, I don't. All I know is that she remembered having met Barber.
Yes. Yeah.
At 9 years of age. And again, a fellow psychologist that I happened to meet some 40 years later after the event, he remembered so precisely, so exactly, and that he had been given a piece of dried fruit, and yet had never opened the copy of God Speaks which I'd sold him, had never inquired, never shown any interest whatsoever in Barber from that moment on, and yet remembered. Isn't that interesting, that impression that will be reawakened next lifetime, no doubt. And that he'll find himself perhaps born in a Barber family and will not understand intellectually why he's drawn to love and worship Avatar Meher Baba. I stop there at that point?
I think that's a good place to stop.
J. Barber. J. Barber. To continue on Saturday, that is the 11th of August. Remember, we've covered the morning and the darshan program that Barber offered the Australian public, and then the arrangements were made for him to depart to Melbourne, as was the arrangement that he would spend Saturday night and Sunday night in Melbourne at the home of Dr. Dennis and Joan O'Brien, and then return on the Monday here to Beacon Hill.
Just continue.
So again, no, before I drove him in, Barber, at one point I was with Barber, just Barber, Erich and myself, and Barber said, from my recollection, Barber said, "Are you coming to Melbourne with us?" And I said, "No, Barber, we don't have the money. Only Joan is going because she wants her mother to meet you. But we, myself and the 3 children, will stay here." And Barber said to stay in the house while he was away. So I drove Barber to the airport. I don't remember the trips in and out of the airport into the city. Not clear in my mind that when things happened, but I remember one incident at the airport. There was, of course, a tremendous amount of luggage, because not only was Barber and the 4 men Mundley going with him, but there were I don't know how many, but possibly 15 to 20, I really don't remember, Sydney people, Sydney Barber lovers, going with Barber to visit that southern city of Melbourne. And I remember Barber turning to me at one point. There was a pile of luggage, all being sorted out, and being handled in the terminal. And Barber gestured to me about did I know whether everything was all right? Was I, in other words, indicated that I should be in, as it were, was I in charge of the luggage? And I said, "No, Barber." I said, I asked Robert to look after it. And Barber smiled, quick smile, and nodded, and turned away. That was a little incident, but sort of nice little personal, natural contact with me. Again, something which I remember.
Didn't he leave you a manuscript?
What?
Didn't he leave you a manuscript?
Yeah, but wait a minute. Oh, yes, that's right. Now, before we departed, when I told Barber I was not going, and Barber said that we were to, myself and the 3 children were to stay in the house, Barber also gave me the manuscript of Life at its Best, which hadn't been published at that point. It had been prepared in India by Mayawan from discourses that Barber had given over and messages during the 30s, the 1930s, and were then checked by Dr. Deschmuck and given titles, but it was a manuscript, and Baba gave that to me to read whilst he was away. So after driving Baba, I returned home, and I and the 3 children re-entered the house and into the big room which Baba had occupied. And to this day, I still can relive the atmosphere of that room, the incredible feeling of his presence, the warmth of his presence. All I can say is the perfume of his presence. It's impossible for me to define, but it was the most incredible. For some reason, that atmosphere hit me. Perhaps it was for the first time I was in a room in which I could savour the presence the presence of Baba in that room, of having been in that room for a period of time. It was incredible. So I brought mattresses in for all of us, and we slept in the big room very happily, and I think most of the day we seemed to spend there too. I must confess, I was so happy, and of course I was looking after the children and getting meals for them, but I must admit that I only read about half the manuscript. And when Baba returned, he asked me, I handed it back to him, and he asked if I had read it. I said, Baba, about half. I confessed that I had not finished it. I wish now that I'd made a greater effort, but there are so many regrets that one that one has, remembering the times that one was with Baba, and how we just simply, or I did not so fully appreciate the incredible good fortune I had of being with the Lord. So Baba, of course I was not in Melbourne, so I can't tell you of that, but there are records of his stay there and the homes that he visited, the people that he had some personal contact with. Again, it was a continuation from my reading and talking with those that were in Melbourne. It was a continuation of Baba demonstrating to us how natural love should be, how natural it should be, in how we should be with God-man, and how natural he was with us in so many ways, and yet giving us so clearly the ideal of what we should be and how we should be with each other. Yeah. So, come Monday afternoon, I drove again into the city, into the airport, and collected Baba and drove him back. Now, I don't know I don't know again on which trip it was when certain things were said and done, but one vivid memory was, and I could have been Monday afternoon, driving beloved Barbara back to Beacon Hill House, and of course I had my eyes glued on the road as he told me to. I had both hands on the wheel, and I was driving very happily but intently, and all of a sudden it was as though a little bomb went off in my head. I was of course conscious of Barbara sitting alongside it. Naturally that would be so, but I was not looking at him. It wasn't that I suddenly saw him, but this, as it were, a little explosion took place in my head, and I thought, oh, incredible, that this slight, silent figure that's sitting alongside me is the only reality, that the whole creation came out of him. And so overwhelming was that thought and feeling that it just came to me. I can't drive and think of that. I'll think about it tomorrow. And instantly, immediately, Barbara responded in gestures, of course, and Erich, who was always on the alert for Barbara's gestures, Barbara's communication, he picked it up, and Barbara said to me, yes, I am that. I am the only reality, that it's all the creation, I am the creator. Now, to be honest, I don't remember what Barbara said. It was actually quite a little discourse, a little statement, quite a statement on that. But all I know is that how would I put it, that conviction, without being able to understand, without being able to, of course, intellectualize it. But all I know is, yes, Maya Barbara is that. He is the Creator. He is the Lord that created everything and sustains everything, that He is. What else is there? There's only one, and that one being encompasses all of us and everything that, whatever is apparent has been projected from Him, from that one being. You can't even say one being. I mean, you can't separate. It just is. Anyway, I'm not at that stage where I could say anything more. I don't remember now what about Monday. I do. The next thing I know is that Tuesday, that is the 14th of August, which happens to be my birthday, but I wasn't aware of it then. No one was apparently aware of it, because certainly no one mentioned it. But I like to think that it was a special day for me, because without Barbara saying anything, made it that way. First of all, in the morning, it was arranged that I should drive him to the homes of certain Barbara lovers that were in the area. And first of all, he called me in to the big room where he was. And when I came in, I can see it now, Barbara was seated on one of our wooden kitchen chairs. He was actually facing the internal rock wall of the big room, and standing behind him was Erich combing his hair and then plaiting it into a plait, which Barbara would then tuck into the collar if necessary, as in travelling. And Barbara questioned me, through Erich of course, about driving him, and yes, and this and that. I don't remember the conversation, I just remember the scene so vividly. But what I do remember was that perhaps it was at the end, and Barbara gestured of his body. He said that this body is so fine. Now, I don't remember the word that Erich used, but it was a word that covers. It could be gosma. It's so fine, as Barbara gestured, that all the winds of the world can blow through it. It's so insubstantial. In other words, it's there. There's no substance. And that remains, that scene, those moments remain very, very vividly with me. So then I did drive him to the two homes of Barbara lovers that lived close by. John Grant, and we went to his house, and to Frances Lee, the young woman painter that I've mentioned earlier. I was with him. It has been written up. Would you like me to say? I don't. I mean, it wasn't my personal experience. I mean, I was an observer. I do remember being with Barbara in the garden behind his house, coming out with him. He came out of the house, John Grant's house. Sorry, yeah, John Grant's house, and looked towards a shed that had a little veranda, and under that veranda was seated an elderly man. It turned out to be John Grant's father. And Barbara stopped. And then the father got up and started to move towards Barbara. And then Barbara moved towards him. I remember that.
And they met.
And then they met, yeah. Otherwise, no, I'm sorry. I don't remember any particular incident.
Did you go to Frances Lee's house?
Yes, we went to Frances Lee's house, and again, I don't remember any particular incident that occurred. The main thing was that Barbara visited those two houses, neither of which have remained in possession of a Barbara lover.
Was that the house that Frances's husband owned that still remains?
Yeah, it still remains, yes. It's still there, and very often when we're there, we may go for a walk along that road and walk past that house, remembering that the Lord walked on that land, through that house. In itself is a wonderful feeling and wonderful memory.
So that was in the morning of the 14th?
And that was in the morning. And then, again, I don't remember, did we have, yes, no, I can't remember what meetings we had. There was one occasion which I must go back to, which has been written up, and that was that Barber did permit one interview during his stay in Sydney, and that was with a young radio reporter, if I remember rightly, who also belonged to a Sufi group, not the Sufi Society. He was not familiar with us, but somehow he did hear of Barber coming and requested an interview, and Barber granted it. And that was a significant interview. The details, what was, it was recorded, and it's been written up in the books. And then on the Tuesday, to return to August 14th, let's say that it could have been late morning before lunch, or it could have been very early afternoon. But we were with Barber, and Barber announced that he would take us all to the pictures, to the picture theatre. And there was, of course, a great flurry of excitement and movement. Oh, what film? Where will we go? What theatre? Where? This, that. It was agreed that it would be in the city, a city theatre.
Everyone was so busy, they didn't really know about...
No one, we'd all been so busy for months, none of us had seen any films or were aware of any films.
Getting ready for Barber's arrival.
Getting ready for Barber's arrival, correct. And then somebody said, well, I've been told by a friend that a film, The Man Who Never Was, a wartime film, it was a good film. So we said, well, let's take a chance and we'll book accordingly. So we found the theatre in one of the main streets of Sydney. And we booked, again, I don't remember the number of seats, probably in the order of 30, 35 seats. There were 2 rows in the balcony. In those days, there was the upper balcony of the theatre, and the lower part were known as stalls. And we booked them, as I said, in 2 rows in the balcony. So again, I drove Barber in. I can remember driving onto that road. It was a one-way road.
Always using the Baron's car?
Always using the one car. I felt so happy because it was quite a posh car, if I could put it. I've never had a car like it. Leather seats, lovely leather, lounge-like seats, wood panelling, and very. It would have been in those days an expensive car. It was.
There's a picture of it right behind you.
Right. Yeah. So I drove him in. I remember.